Greetings and welcome to the latest edition of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast. As always, I am your host Martin, and I'm happy to have you with me today. For this week's episode, we have yet another addition to my growing and developing playlist that I am adding my podcast episodes to on my YouTube channel of the Entheogenic Evolution. The playlist is Psychedelic Oregon, and that means, yes, I've got another interview with someone here in Oregon involved in the world of psychedelics. This interview features Mike Kirkwood, who is the owner and founder of Shrooms Cafe, which is a rather interesting cafe here in Ashland, Oregon, my hometown, where you can go and take a low dose of psilocybin mushrooms and actually enjoy a show and socialize. And it's legal. So that's part of the Oregon Psilocybin Program, the way that this was developed. That this allows Mike to run a business like this. We had a very interesting conversation just the other day, and I'm excited to bring that to you here on the podcast. But of course, first, a few announcements before I get into the conversation with Mike. So I'm actually recording this podcast episode a few weeks early as I am heading out of town to visit family over on the other side of the United States. And this episode is coming out the day that I'm flying back home. So if you have made a contribution in support of the Entheogenic Evolution podcast over these past couple of weeks, thank you very much for your support. I would imagine that you did it over at Patreon, patreon.com/MartinWBall. And maybe I'll have a couple people that I need to catch up with on the next podcast episode, thanking them. But of course, just a thanks to everyone who has ever supported me over at Patreon. It's the kind of thing where people can come and go and change their support level, and especially at the upper tiers of the cap and God molecule level that also come with 30 and 60-minute video call check-ins with me. People use that for a time when they feel that they need that extra support, and then they move on or they downgrade their membership, which is always fine and always welcome. But if you'd like to support me, support this podcast, and actually get something back in return, then you can come on over to Patreon, and there's everything from $1 a month up to $100 a month. Also, because I am recording this early, this might be completely inaccurate information, but I'm going to say it anyway. We're now 2 weeks out from the next round of my 5-MeO DMT Integration Specialist training course with Mindscape Institute. This is a 9-week course, and it starts on Wednesday, September 17th. I'm just imagining that there are a few spaces left in this class. If you would like to participate, it is open to anyone who wants to learn more about the process and practice of helping people integrate their 5-MeO DMT experiences from a non-dual and energetic perspective. This is coming directly out of not only my own work with 5-MeO DMT for the past 17 years, but my work as a professional 5-MeO integration coach and guide, and also as the author of the book 5-MeO DMT Integration Embodying Non-Duality is Not What You Think. And this is open to anyone who wants to learn more about this practice. And in particular, it's designed for people who work as therapists, integration coaches, and also facilitators. But again, it's open to anyone who wants to learn more. So if you want to jump in on this next round of the class, shoot me an email at martinwball@gmail.com. You can stop by my personal webpage, martinball.net, or nondualentheogenicintegration.com if you want a few more details. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have and would love to see you in this 9-week course, helping you become better informed and educated around how to help people with their 5-MeO DMT experiences. And as something I always like to say, this does require a specialized education. Standard psychedelic integration protocols do not work with 5-MeO DMT. It's too different. It needs a specialized training and education, and that's what I'm providing through this course. And of course, as always, I am available for 30, 60, or 90-minute integration calls with you. Just reach out, martinwball@gmail.com, or stop by nondualentheogenicintegration.com and shoot me an email, and we'll set up a time where you and I can meet and talk about whatever it is that you need to talk about and help you out with some feedback and reflection. Okay, I think that's all I got for now. I hope you enjoyed last week's installment of part 1 of God's Handbook for Operating Human Vehicles, and no nonsense, no strings approach to universal being. We'll have part 2 coming up next week, and then after the following interview, we will get into volume 3 of the Tales of Arduin saga and epic with the Alchemist and the Eagle. So let's go ahead and jump into this conversation with Mike Kirkwood of Shrooms Cafe, the next installment of my Psychedelic Oregon series and playlist on YouTube. Well, I am welcoming on to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast today Mike Kirkwood, who is actually joining me right here in Ashland, Oregon, though we are doing this over Zoom just because it's easier to get good quality audio for the podcast. We're not actually here in person, but we're not that far apart because Mike is located in downtown Ashland and I am located not too far away from downtown Ashland. But Mike, welcome to the Entheogenic Evolution podcast, and I'm really excited to talk to you about Shrooms Cafe today.
Oh, wow. Thank you. I'm honored to be here. Even that word that you use for the podcast is something I'm still learning about. What is the whole focus of of your sessions here?
Yeah, well, I'll just give you a little history lesson. So I myself moved to Ashland, Oregon in the very end of 2007. And at that point, I had recently published my first book, Mushroom Wisdom. So it had kind of come out of the, quote, psychedelic closet publicly with my book, Mushroom Wisdom. And also by the time I moved up here, my next book, Sage Spirit, which is about Salvia divinorum, was already published. But I moved up here to Ashland with no job, no prospects, and just really wanting to kind of make a new life for myself. So one of the things that I did when I first got here is there was this outfit called EQTV, which was run by Jason Gallagher, who currently runs shows out of the Ashland Armory. Mm-hmm. And he had this idea. I'm sorry, what's that?
EQTV, like a emotional quotient?
Yeah. He was called EQTV, and it was going to be online, but produce like online television shows. And then also it was in conjunction with the club that he was running at the time that I believe was called the Mobius. And there was going to be like live music, and then there was going to be commentary, and it was all going to be streamed online. And he wanted to develop like independent shows that would be part of this EQTV. And the idea behind the whole thing was it was all about evolution, right? Mm. So when I first moved up here, not having a job, not knowing what else I was going to do, that I was basically searching everywhere for something to do to make money. And I ended up talking with Jason Gallagher, and we discussed my interest in psychedelics. And he said, oh, well, why don't you develop a show about psychedelics, and we can have that on EQTV.
Whoa.
And so I thought it sounded pithy to call it the entheogenic evolution. And so if you yourself are not familiar with the word entheogen, it's a synonym for psychedelic. So it was coined in the 1970s to try and distinguish the ceremonial and sacred use of psychedelics from the more casual cultural use of psychedelics. So say the use of like mushrooms in traditional cultures or ayahuasca in traditional cultures versus like popping some shrooms or some LSD at a Grateful Dead show, just for example. So entheogen means generating the experience of the divine within. So this show...
That's a great definition. Psychedelic, what would you say the definition of psychedelic is compared to that? It's have mind-altering effects that make you see colors?
Well... The word psychedelic was coined a little bit earlier, and that was to replace hallucinogen or psychotomimetic. So the early Western investigations into psychedelics were looking at it for possible therapeutic applications, and that also there was this idea that maybe by taking a psychedelic that it's mimicking some kind of psychosis. So it's a psychotomimetic. And then the idea psychedelic was introduced as, well, it's psyche means like mind or soul, and delic means to manifest or give rise to. So it's something that exposes these different layers or different aspects of the mind. So that's psychedelic. But then the word psychedelic kind of got incorporated into the counterculture to refer to different styles of art or music, or like, hey, that's psychedelic. So it became popularized that way, and got associated, at least in the broader culture, with the idea of sort of hedonistic activities, like, oh, you're just taking drugs and like having a good time, versus an entheogen is a ceremonial sacrament that you are taking in a sacred ceremony to commune with the sacred. So it's trying to imply a different level or different context of use of the same substance.
It's acknowledging the spiritual part. Is that would be the one thing that's different?
Yeah, that would be the way to distinguish it.
Wow. I mean, dude, I feel like we should just stop now. This is such a win. Thanks. That's the best example, definition I've heard in a while. I really appreciate you spending the extra time on that.
Oh, well, it's my pleasure. And yeah, so then in developing the entheogenic evolution, my background actually is in religious studies. I have my PhD in religious studies. So I kind of came at it from that angle, and then developed this podcast first as this TV show that only did like 3 episodes online, and then cultivated it as just an audio podcast. And I've been doing it ever since. So it's almost 18 years old at this point. And I've been hosting it here in Ashland ever since. And one of the things that I like to do on the podcast is kind of document how things have changed in the psychedelic world since when I started. And one of these would be when Shrooms Cafe was brought to my attention by another psychedelic enthusiast who came over and was hanging out one afternoon. He's like, hey, have you heard of the Shrooms Cafe that just opened up downtown? I was like, no, I haven't heard of it. What is it? So he brought it to my attention. And then I thought, hey, let's see if I can get these guys in on the podcast, because this is interesting. And I'd like to get in an interview and help kind of promote what's going on locally with the Shrooms Cafe. So that's how we ended up here, Mike.
Wow, that's an amazing. What I'm going to have to dig in further into the archive. I had a chance to browse it, but I guess I just wasn't aware of the impact that you've been making here from our town. Ashland has such a special vibe. I bet it feels pretty good to be here.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a big change for me. I moved up here from Southern California, and it's just totally different kind of place. And really enjoyed kind of cultivating the psychedelic scene. In some degrees, I was kind of a leader in the local psychedelic scene for quite a while. I started organizing talks at Jackson Wellsprings. Actually, the very first talk by Tom and Cherie Eckert, who led the push for the psilocybin-assisted program here in Oregon. I organized their very first talk at Jackson Wellsprings. I think that was back in 2015. And then
their foundation is active today. I don't know anything about it, but I've heard its name a couple times.
Yeah,
Cherie
Eckert Foundation, and they were the ones that initiated the whole push for making your cafe something that could happen.
Dude, you did that work right here in Ashland. They came all the way down to the Wellsprings.
Yeah, it was their very first public talk.
Dude, what a place too! I love that place.
Yeah. And then for several years, I hosted a free conference at Southern Oregon University where I taught during that time period. And the last, that was called Exploring Psychedelics. And the last one that happened was in 2018. And then in 2019, I had a major health crisis that I barely survived and had been in recovery after that. And then COVID came along, and then I got laid off from the university due to budget cuts. They've been having major budget issues at SOU, particularly since COVID. And so I haven't really been public locally since that time period, but been doing the podcast.
Event like? What was that event like, that last one that you did there? It sounded amazing. I wonder how I missed that. I think I was in town then. I think I moved here back in 2010.
Yeah, well, you probably were here. I did it from 2014 to 2018. And in 2014, we just did like one day. It was like 6 hours long. And then by the 2018 event, it was 3 days long, 2 days at Southern Oregon University. And then we had our after party at Jackson Wellsprings, and then followed up by another day of events there at Jackson Wellsprings. So it
Damn,
was
dog,
three
that's
days
so
long.
cool. Wow,
Yeah.
that's like the precursor for what was going on in Denver. Sounds like I don't know the whole history of other places in the world and their movements towards this, but it seems like the West Coast is always just like, and Oregon has just been right in the middle of it.
Yeah, we've definitely been pioneers here in Oregon. And at the time that I was hosting Exploring Psychedelics, it was definitely the largest psychedelic gathering north of San Francisco, along the West Coast. And since the time that I've done that, there have been a couple other people have put together conferences like up in Portland, and I think also in Seattle, but I haven't been involved in those. But for a while, yeah, Exploring Psychedelics was kind of the place. So it was fun to host that. But my health took a really dramatic turn in 2019, so I just was not able to organize that any longer.
Not psychedelic related, I'm assuming.
No. Completely different issue. And it's a whole other topic. We don't need to get into that. But I'm enjoying like sharing this history with you. Yeah, this has been going on, and even beyond, like that's just my own involvement here in Ashland. But like prior to that, just keep in mind that actually this has been kind of a hotbed for psychedelic culture in the sense that, particularly more out in the country, there has been a long-standing use of ayahuasca and ayahuasca ceremonies like out in the hills. There's been long presence of the Native American church and peyote. And then, of course, there's also the Santo Daime church, which drinks daime, which what they call ayahuasca. And they actually had their legal court case against the federal government to retain their religious freedom exemption around drinking of ayahuasca. And that was back in 2008 and 2009. That was, again, when I had just first moved here to Ashland, and I was attending the church during that time period. So that was also another very interesting movement.
Where was that at? What court was that in?
That was in federal court. So that's the Church of the Holy Light of the Queen, which is located a little bit outside of town, out by Immigrant Lake here in Ashland. And
How badass is that? Jeez,
yeah,
how do you wouldn't? You could live your whole life and not even know things. I probably have met somebody who was involved in some of these things. We had so many great people that come by here, but wow. Then they basically, how did they took it all the way and won? Is what you're saying?
yeah, they took the federal government to court because they had had some of their ayahuasca confiscated, and actually their leader had been arrested at one point. And so they used the Religious Freedom Restoration Act to take the federal government to court to make an exception to say, even though this tea contains DMT, which is a Schedule 1 illegal drug at the federal level, that we are seeking exemption for our religious freedom because this is our religious sacrament. And they won the right to do that. So it's one of the few places that you can go in the United States and legally drink ayahuasca.
Holy
is
crap.
right here in Ashland. Yeah.
How do you not know things like that? And I knew that there's a couple of places I've heard about, but I had no idea. I mean, and Ashland is such a special place, and it's weird how some of the like you would imagine that would be like in the sneak preview or something. You know what I mean? Like somebody would be like,
Well, it's interesting that it's not, I don't know. There's not a lot of publicity around this stuff. Like even when I was running the Exploring Psychedelics conference, I think it got mentioned in the local news like maybe once. And yeah, I've been doing this podcast here for 17 years. This is now one of the oldest psychedelics related podcasts in the world at this point because I've been doing this for so long.
Who are you watching? Who's still out there? That's
from when I first started this, my goodness. I mean, there was Lorenzo Haggerty, where he was mostly just putting out talks by Terrence McKenna that had been recorded. That was a podcast when I first started this. There was another guy, Max, I forget his name, and that was out of London. I don't even know if his podcast is still happening. There was another one called the Sea Realm podcast. I don't know if that is still around at all. I mean, I might be the only one who's still around and still doing this after all of these years. I mean, now there are hundreds and hundreds of podcasts on psychedelics around the world, and some have a much, much larger audience than my own. I mean, I'm just small potatoes, but I've been doing this for a long time and been putting on these events here for a long time. But it's just, it's not really talked about with the ayahuasca church, the Santo Daime church. They have a small office downtown, and it just has the initials CHLQ, the Church of the Holy Light of the Queen. So you would never know.
You don't have to give the whole address if you want, but what street is that on, or block is that on, or something? I just want to see if I can find it, because I walk around all the time. I haven't noticed it.
Well, it's right there on Main Street. I'm not certain which block it is, but
I bet you it's probably between 2nd and 3rd, or up there. Is it up there?
Yeah. It's somewhere over there. And so you just have to look for CHLQ, Church of the Holy Light of the Queen, and then that's their offices. And other than that, they don't have a strong public presence. And their founder, Jonathan...
They're the original speakeasy.
Yeah.
But a new speakeasy.
Yeah, and their founder, Jonathan Goldman, way back in the day, did like a 3-hour-long interview here on this podcast, but he hasn't really done too many interviews beyond that that I'm aware of. So yeah, there's a long, illustrious history of psychedelics here in Ashland, but I certainly have found that a lot of people who are active on the scene right now aren't really aware of, like yourself. I mean, people don't know that I was hosting the Exploring Psychedelics conference at SOU for a number of years. Many people, like yourself, don't know that I've been hosting this podcast here out of Ashland for all these years, or that, we have the Santo Daime Church, or that the ayahuasca community, and, also used to have these events at the well springs. Just people don't know about it, but it's, things change, there's a shift in who's involved and what's happening. And of course, all of my activity with all of this was before the passage of Proposition, 120 or 210? I forget. Maybe I'm mixing up the numbers. But the ones that legalized psilocybin-assisted services in Oregon. All of this happened before then. So it was part of the lead up to what made your cafe possible.
Wow. I'm so interested. Did you happen to record that meeting at the Wellsprings?
Yeah. I had recorded all of those. They had all been out on my podcast. I lost a lot of materials in 2020. I had a hard drive crash that had all my backup files on it. So I don't know if I have the original talk from Tom and Cherie Eckert, but I do have some material from them that's available on the Entheogenic Evolution archive, which is at my Patreon page. So it's not publicly available anymore, but that stuff is still out there. But Mike, let's talk about you, and let's talk about the Shrooms Cafe. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of the Ashland history with you and also the listening audience, because again, not a lot of people know about this. So welcome to being part of the history of Ashland. So you are now part of the contemporary scene of Ashland, and will one day be part of the history of Ashland. But let's talk about the Shrooms Cafe, and what is it, and what inspired you, and how did you get involved in this, and who are you? Let's start with that. Who is Mike, and how did Mike get involved in this area?
Oh yeah, thank you. I appreciate you inviting me to the show. It's been quite a journey, learning things about people who've been sharing, learning things, and so I've really been quite humbled by this whole operation, and in so many ways. So the Shrooms Cafe, on one angle, is an expression of how if I was doing it, making a huge living room where people can do whatever they want, how it would look and how it would feel, and what the kind of engagement would be like. It's a on the other hand, it's very specifically operating the rule set that Oregon agreed to, and it's administered by the OHA and the OPS group inside of that And so we operate and also watch, significant amount of clumsiness just in the process of administering the mushrooms and getting authorization to do them, et cetera. Oregonians are pretty brave, in my opinion. I certainly wasn't the person leading the charge to get it so that Oregon allowed access to psilocybin. I wasn't involved in MAPS. I didn't know anything about it really, other than just periphery. So I was just, obviously we're working on the shoulders of, giants, to even, have a place that we could rent and somebody would actually let us even do it. And this particular owners of this particular space or the landlords, they actually enthusiastically helped us make this work, meaning then they didn't do like a lot of other businesses that come out of the woodwork where they, apply a special tax to them and make them, pinch them, if you will, because they're trying to do something new. So in Ashland, we found a place where it was actually really all kind of about the love. Like, could we bring something to this town that adds something to its already, significant legacy of coolness? And what would that look like? What would it feel like? What would it do? What would it not do? So that's what we're all about.
Yeah, so just looking at your website here, it says the psychedelic hub for safe space, connection, and personal growth, world's most affordable legal access to psilocybin services. So this is all part of what we've already mentioned a couple times now is the passage of the psilocybin services bill in Oregon, which I think was passed in like 2020 or 2021. And then there was a couple years of development of like, how is this going to be rolled out? And it is what regulates where and how psilocybin mushrooms can be distributed and consumed and used in a legal framework. But what you seem to be doing at Shrooms Cafe is a little bit different. So, I've interviewed a number of different places that do the education around the facilitation, then also the facilitation. And it's often this model of, we've got a room, somebody comes in, they get their dose, they're in the room, they're supervised for 5 or 6 hours. But like what you've got going on at Shrooms Cafe just looks really different. So you've kind of described it a little bit, but I'd like to invite you, like, give us some more details about how is this run and how does it work as part of the Oregon Psilocybin Program? Because it's a very different model. And then also looking at, you've got some, let's see, where is it? I've got my browser open. So I've got the Shrooms Cafe on Facebook, and it looks like you guys are hosting music and events. And then on the web page for shroomscafe.com, if anybody wants to look it up, you've got some pictures of, it's a little cafe, it's a bar, and you've got like these cushy chairs and like some lounge space. So yeah, tell us more about it and how the whole thing works within the legal framework and legal program.
Well, thank you. Thank you for looking that up. Yeah, actually, I'm not a Facebook user, so I wasn't exactly sure what was out there. But I am I do have to, of course, try to be on Instagram, which they, don't allow the Shrooms Cafe to be on. We've had our account pulled a couple times, at the critical point, as it were, when it's almost worth doing. So we do have we have to be low key because there's a constant block on all of our activities. Even though it's legal in Oregon, doesn't mean it's legal on the interstate traffic or the wire or the bank or the whoever doing whatever, out there ever. So Ashland's kind of an interesting place because my understanding is Ashland isn't one of the cities that by itself decriminalized psilocybin like there are around the country.
Right.
Although maybe before, I did undergraduate school back here graduated in the 90s, early. And Ashland had a very vibe, kind of centered around rare earth and the old co-op and the new co-op and, kind of changed, if you will, bought out, I guess, of people summary, or kind of shifted. A lot of the nightclubs were out of town even before the pandemic. People were really struggling to be able to have people awake at night, because this town, had people complaining about noise and stuff in a place that was traditionally, my understanding, pretty rowdy. Unfortunately, I was too young to really get the good stuff, I have a feeling, but you can still feel it. In this building, you can feel it. And so, to give you just a small amount of history of the background, I got lucky enough to get invited to this meeting. I don't know if I was invited or it was a public announcement where this group was responding to the OPS's rules. The OPS is the OHA, Oregon Health Authority division that was set up to help manage this. And my understanding is there's like hundreds of divisions in the OHA, so it's really a small but important, to us at least, group of people who are trying to figure out what to do. What does it mean to legalize where people can be dosing? And the mindset, prior to the Oregon, I think, inheriting it has really been based on the decriminalization places where it's really therapeutic driven and or clinically, you have a referral or a diagnosis that specifically allows you to do this. And Oregonians voted to not require that anybody over 21 can get it. And so in any case, I got lucky to participate in this group that was discussing it. And it was a really interesting forum. There was like a last, if you will, almost, I would think they would even call it, ragtag group of people, whoever showed up, got to put in their point to respond to the OPS in a full, consolidated way. And my background in the corporate world and before has mostly been in the role of kind of facilitator / consensus builder. And so I was watching these guys do this, and I got to contribute a small little micro amount here and there. But what they ended up doing is allowing everybody to have points that they all can together, even if they couldn't actually get a full agreement about them, they would submit together, that they agreed on them more than not having their point. And so one of the women, and I don't remember her name, she was the one who made it so you can actually group dose or low dose in Oregon. The rules here were primarily designed, and when you do it, you'll see for sure, are really designed around these heavy doses that are really going to the ego death and beyond.
Yeah.
And the rules all around that. But at the last moment, this was in December, with the rules getting published in January. That's my recollection. There might be a little, who knows, but they proposed this pretty, strong suggestion on a number of things. And the only one that got accepted was this low dose option, where people could stay a short amount of time, and and a facilitator could actually manage up to 25 people at a time. Because, I'm somebody who's looked at a lot of business opportunities and proposals and things that people want to do in the world, including myself. And you look at them, you're like, there's just no fucking way. Right. And when you looked at this rule set before this adjustment that happened at the literally last moment, you're like, there's just no way. Nobody's gonna be able to afford it because the facilitator is going to cost so much.
Yeah.
Right. It's going to be $2,000 or $3,000. People are going to be doing it, but their expectations are going to be off the fucking charts. And they're doing something that's unnatural, which is being cooped up in a place so you don't know that person. And so it's great, but it's also, is it the field coming alive and bouncing and butterflies and all that shit? No, it's not really. It's therapeutic in design, which is great, but that's human construct, right? A rules construct.
Yeah.
Yes, it's useful. Yes, many people are amazing at it. Personally, I would love to continue to explore that myself. But, being the only way it's done, really, sends a weird signal to the world. Like, it's great if you're doing it the way that the man does it, where you have to have a prescription and a doctor in an expensive situation that you can barely afford, rather than buying them. Like, I think in Oregon, ever since I've been here, they've been readily available for super cheap. And so anyway, the little spark from that is that if you could run a place that had 50 people doing it at a time, or 25 people doing it at a time, and they were all doing it in a low cost way, then somebody could afford to do it. It would be kind of like a bar or a library or a restaurant. And so that's really the inspiration for the Shrooms Cafe, is to try to see that rule all the way to the end, as it were. Like, does that lead us to a place? Now, one of the things about mushrooms that are different than alcohol, for example, in my observation, I think people would say there's a lot of things different, but one of the differences that we've observed is that the social part of it. Like mushrooms, you have to really work your way up to, probably like alcohol in that regard, where you have to work your way up to be able to handle a mid-sized dose and hang out with people who are jittery or feeling different or have colors, or, there's lots of things that happen when people take mid-sized doses that, many of them force them inwards, which is really healthy. But it is something to really, to your point, be in the entheogenic grouping.
Yeah.
And that's really what's happening here at the Shrooms Cafe in terms of the pivot we're making. And this is based me and getting a chance to be at MAPS and feel the vibration of many of these people. At the conference, is that, there is actually a rhythm that these caretakers have had around this medicine that we're actually just picking up we're holding up a little tiny pinnacle of it now, is what we want to be at the Shrooms Cafe. And so anyway, the amazing work that all these folks have been doing. First, we opened up as a place that was just designed to make it easy for lots of people to do the dosing because the rules allowed it. And now we're really, with the feedback of the 500 plus people that we've had do it so far, and our own observations and the community's observations, we've transformed to a place that really, it looks more like a community hub.
Yeah.
It still has to figure out how to do that. I still have to figure out how to do that, but that's, what people need. And there's so many great examples. Like, I got to say, I'm still months after being at PsyCon in Denver, I'm still like, oh my God, that's the good part of psychedelics, is the people to people part. That's what they do. You can see things without your mask being so directly in front of you. So, anyway, we've been quite pleased to be here. We run those rules. Our space is designed here. And we were originally opened up in Medford in a building we had that we designed for the 25-person experience. Medford didn't love the idea of psychedelics, but it decided to do different than what it did in cannabis. In cannabis, it resisted and then got swallowed by the people right on the border, like Jackson County. And then it gave in, and then it made it so anybody could do anything. And now Medford's kind of known for having, like, in some cases, within one block, there's 3 dispensaries. And they're all good. I mean, literally, you could get such a great deal on any of them, you wouldn't even know what to do with yourself. But in psilocybin, what they did is they put it so there was a conditional use permit. And then during the actual process, which that conditional use permit not only requires a relatively large investment and weeks and time for the city planning department to actually go through the process to allow you to do it, then you have to go to the actual hearing in that. In that hearing, we basically got kind of waylaid, I guess you could say, by them enforcing, no matter what happened on the vote for us, they already put in this basically agreement that we couldn't dose after a certain period of time. And that was at 5:30. And so over there, what we had done in our 25-person room is we actually, and the rules we were in, since it was a dosing space, the facilitator, not the facilitator, but the musician and all of the people had to actually agree that they wanted to actually be in the room together, had to sign all the paperwork, showing that they actually agreed on every single person being in the room at the same time. And we hosted a little show there where everybody dosed, right around the same period of time. And these were many people who didn't know each other, little groups of 4 or 5, but we had around 20 people there, 25 people there. And we had some extra facilitators, and we didn't know what to expect exactly. We had a food truck serving mushroom tacos. But what happened there is that many people kind of took this little nudge, this little small dose for the first time. And, like, literally, as one of the sober people not dosing, I was in the admin role, you could actually literally, like, see the sparkles across the room.
Yeah.
And we literally saw people, like, never even knew each other, just, like, so much, like, touching hands, hugging, hanging, really feeling the magic that you may have seen before at a TED show or some conference or concert, friends party, who knows? Maybe never, maybe all the time. But for me, it was, like, just super eye-opening, especially because even that small dose, the 2.5 milligram dose, which in the mushrooms that we have had at the Shrooms Cafe is between 1/4 and 1/2 gram of Kabinzi mushroom. Many people, including myself, feel it enough to actually feel the inward pull and to notice things, especially if you've left a bookmark somewhere, like, oh, that's that thing, or, oh, that's right. It brings out, it's more than just, it's a little nudge, if you will, but it's an important one. And it's really powerful. So So anyway, we did that for a while, but that rule that was effective, having to dose before 5:30 p.m., wasn't consistent with Oregon's rules, but it really caused us to look for another place. And this very special place in Ashland, Oregon, which is where I live, became open, and we decided to go for it, even though it's quite a bit larger. Doesn't allow us to do exactly everything that we were doing before, but it's literally right across from the landmark in Oregon, the Oregon Shakespeare Theater. We can actually glimpse towards the plaza and see it a block down the road from here. And so, like, this space, which was built as a spiritual center, deserves and wants to actually have spiritual beings and people floating around here. It demands it. We have had a number of people say, just being in the space is making me feel the effects of something that I had a couple of weeks ago or whatever. We haven't figured out how to sell that yet, though. I will tell you that, Martin.
Yeah, and when did that move happen? When did you guys open up? Because I think it's maybe about a month ago that somebody first mentioned Shrooms Cafe to me. Actually, I think it was exactly a month ago because we had some friends over for the 4th of July, and today is Monday, August 4th, and I think that's the first time anybody had mentioned it to me. It's like, yeah, have you heard of this place, Shrooms Cafe, that's downtown? So that was exactly a month ago from today. So when was that transition that you guys moved from Medford? And for the listening audience, Medford is a little bit northwest of Ashland. It's a much larger city than Ashland itself. Ashland is quite small in terms of overall population. And as you mentioned, we have the Shakespeare Festival. And as I've mentioned, we have Southern Oregon University. So it's kind of this small college town vibe, strong spiritual artist, sort of hippie vibe in Ashland. And Medford is just more of a mainstream kind of Oregon community. So it's quite a different place than Ashland itself. So yeah, when was that transition from Medford here to Ashland?
Oh yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, it was right. We moved here we got the license in January, right at the beginning of January. And that was a license move that OPS performed and moved here. And that was relatively quick. The people that we've worked with there have been quite on top of it. You know, they're dealing with some really large conceptual / layered rule system that's really quite complicated. And one of the things, for example, we wanted to do here, which we still want to do, is going to require some additional effort because we're on the top floor of this building. Second floor, there's quite a number of steps to walk up here. It was built originally as a gathering hall for a spiritualist society back over 100 years ago. It was one of the last buildings built downtown Ashland. And it really was designed to kind of enjoy the presence of Ashland. That's how I feel being here, which I'm up there right now at the cafe. I'm in the lobby area. It has 6 different rooms, 3 on each side, 3 in the front, look down on the kind of traffic of East Main Street. Mm-hmm. The 3 in the back kind of look back onto the alley, which has a club, a number of restaurants, Cook's Alley that people kind of hang out at night on and stuff. It's been a number of things over the years, and right now we're operating as the Shrooms Cafe, which means we have 6 rooms that are licensed for people to be able to dose in. The size of the room determines how many people can do that. Our biggest room, the VIP room, we can do up to 12 people at a time. I was just thinking when you said July 4th, that was a fun weekend. It seems like a decade ago to me. I swear things have been going. We've been doing a lot of events and just other things going on, but Iridescence and Yom played, I believe, on Independence Day here, and that was quite a thing. Both of those guys are amazing, and so we've been really lucky. Like one of the benefits of being here and running shows at the in the evenings after the cafe is shut down allows us to get to meet some really amazing people and get to see more music and feel some of the warm vibes that happen. I think a lot of the original Ashland maybe moved to Williams is kind of my feeling, because Ashland kind of is bigger, more expensive, and less hippie than it probably used to be. I don't know how you feel about it, but like last couple shows that we had here, we had Salamander crew out here last week, and they did a cacao ceremony with all of their, and they had a big crew here that was doing like this big, rounded dance slash chant thing, and just the chance to actually be here with such a special vibe with such great people has been worth it for us in terms of running this cafe.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really interesting aspect of what you're offering is that you are providing music and a gathering space, and that's something it's always been difficult here in Ashland. It's like you mentioned, there's not a lot of, quote, nightlife in Ashland. Ashland mostly shuts down by like 9 p.m. most nights, and even on weekend nights. We do have the Ashland Armory for kind of big shows, but we don't have a lot of places for small shows. Like I myself, I'm a musician. The last time I played out was at the Dragon Gong Fu Tea House that was right before COVID shut everything down. That was my last performance. But we had that as a space. There's Oberon's, which has like a little teeny tiny stage and little teeny tiny space. I used to play Oberon's like once or twice a month. I did that for several years. Then there's like the Well Springs, but there's not a lot of venues. There's not a lot of places for people to play music, for people to gather, and certainly what you guys are offering at Shrooms Cafe, where people could come and take a microdose and then enjoy a music show. I mean, that's just such a development. We've never had anything like that here in Ashland before, and I'm sorry that I haven't come over there. I've been kind of living as a hermit like the past several years for the most part. So, I haven't been too involved in like the local scene. I currently live across the street from Lithia Park, so I go over to the free shows. Like we just had. Did you go to March 4th marching band at the park?
I missed that. I heard good things about it. People were just so jazzed about it.
Oh my God, that was so much fun. Oh, it was totally awesome.
Ashland throws down. It's just really trying to, it's creating a new generation of activity in town. I mean, being here in summer has just been like this year. I've been so pleasant because I've been working in Medford. And so now being focused on my time here in Ashland, I'm like, dang, people are really putting out some cool stuff out here. Like, we got lucky enough to host part of one of the events that these guys had a couple months ago called the Fringe Festival.
Yeah.
Kind of similar thing that you were saying, and something that arose out of the cool place, Southern Oregon University. I'm a Bader grad, as I mentioned, although I'm actually petitioning for them to be called the Ravens rather than the Raiders because they know of the obvious issues with that. Yeah. Being that this particular piece of land that we're in was an incredible, important part of that. The Shakespeare Festival guys here, even when they do all their shows, they still, are, following that tradition of, offering back the space to the people that were here, before the homies were. It's quite a special area that we're in here in Ashland. I heard really good things about that Gung Fu place. I think I popped in there once or twice, but it was like that underground spot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
The guys that run it are pretty prolific musicians. I heard some great things about it.
Yeah, that was a fun place to do some music. And when I played there, I brought out my loop pedal and, a collection of instruments and had a great time. And then the next day, everything got shut down due to COVID and, all of those restrictions. And the family that ran...
Maybe you're going too hard. And the man was just like, fuck it. This is the time. We got to pull the switch. Fucking, he's going to go fucking big.
Yeah, and now, the people who ran the tea house, they now live in Thailand, so that they have completely moved out of the country. That's actually my 12-year-old son is friends with their son, so they still connect online and talk about fishing, even though they're all the way over there in Thailand. But yeah, things really shut down in terms of social gatherings here in Ashland through COVID. I mean, just as it did like everywhere else. And then it just feels like things have picked up like with First Fridays again, but I myself, like I said, I've felt very much like a hermit these past several years, so just feel out of the loop. But I'm just excited that you're doing stuff there at Shrooms Cafe, and so let's talk a little bit more about like what that means. That because again, this is really different. Like just so for anybody who's listening, who's not a regular listener of my podcast, so if you just want as a comparison. A few months back, I interviewed Dr. Tracy Townsend, and she runs Meadow Medicine, which is a psilocybin service center up in Portland. So at the other end of the beautiful state of Oregon. And I would encourage people just to listen to that. And actually, on my YouTube channel, The Entheogenic Evolution, I'm going to be collecting all of these Oregon-related interviews into one playlist. I've called it Psychedelic Oregon, so people could find it there as well. But just in contrast, at Meadow Medicine, they work with one person a day, and they have maybe 3 clients a week, and that they are going for the quote heroic dose of mushrooms, the large therapeutic dose, but it's totally different than what's happening at Shrooms Cafe. So let's just talk a little bit more about what this means, that people can come in and take a microdose and hang out or catch a show or actually socialize with other people. Because again, this is a completely different model than the large dose individual session format. And I didn't even know that this was possible as part of the psilocybin program in Oregon. And as you've shared, apparently this was like a last minute addition. So like even talking to you, this is the first I've really heard that, because when I looked up Shrooms Cafe, I was like, well, how could they even do this? How is this even possible? Like, I didn't think that that's the way that the Oregon Psilocybin Program worked, but apparently it can. So yeah, I invite you to just share more about how people are enjoying it this way. And you said you've already served like 500 people or something, which is just phenomenal.
Thank you. Have you ever seen the movie Old School?
I don't think so.
Oh, well, there's this group, the guys that are older that take over this fraternity on accident, and they just happen to have a guy on their team who's really good at paperwork. And he just makes it all work because he just keeps on filing paperwork. He's like, oh yeah, we became a fraternity. Oh yeah, we did this. Oh yeah, we took over that land, whatever it is. That's kind of in a way how we exist because, as mentioned, the rules in Oregon allow this, but it's relatively inconvenient the way the rules work because of you're really planning for this heavy dose, but you're doing paperwork for that, but you're choosing to do the small dose the way it works. I'm just kind of simplifying it. But in any case, we are relatively good at paperwork. We wrote a little application that allows us to, scan somebody's ID and just keep it to ourselves in our own secure space rather than sharing it with the outside world or having another company in between us and, success, DataPath, et cetera. But we wrote a tool that just allows us to do these, 5 pieces of paperwork that are required for you to do prior to coming to a session, 24 hours prior. And then the 2 pieces of paperwork that you're required at minimum to do a single dose by yourself, or 3 pieces of paperwork that you're required to do every time if you're doing it as a group. And so Oregon kind of has it does a good job, in my opinion, of setting up a reasonable expectation for somebody who's doing a heavy dose to make sure it's not a casual thing, that there's some sort of planning gone into it and some sort of handoff between you and the very important facilitator that's there holding you while you're doing that event. We have found that same spirit really carries over to the low dose. We're not actually administering them casually where we're like, just do it because of the rules. People are getting quite a lot out of low dosing mushrooms.
Yeah.
Like you mentioned, it's a new thing you observed that we're doing. We did have to create some new vocabulary to support that. Like we introduced a term, low dose, rather than a microdose. A microdose, we still think that the world is okay with being around 1 milligram of psilocybin analyte, where a low dose is around 2.5 milligrams of psilocybin analyte. What we've observed in between those two doses is that, one of the customers that we've had who has done a number of them as a cycle and switched back and forth is like, if I take the low dose, the microdose, I come out of there with a burst of energy, with a fresh energy and freshness towards all the tasks on my list that I'm going to go work on, or the walk that I'm going to do. But if I take the 2.5 milligram dose, which sounds very similar, in Oregon's rule, there's no difference. Oregon's rule, they're both below the minimum level required for a time level here. But in that second dose, many people are, he described it as, I throw away the list that I came in with and I write a new list. And that's the real difference between those doses, that I get to the point where I'm actually really going inside and saying, is this the thing I want to spend time on, rather than listening to my prior self of where I set what my priorities were. And I think that's kind of a mimic across the whole cellular system that psychedelics or that psilocybin or psilocin tend to affect. For me at least, it's like every one of your systems that you're connected to is checking in. Like, hey, am I making good decisions the way I'm smiling, the way I'm standing, the way that I'm breathing, the way that I'm digesting, the way that I'm, thinking. And the low dose is enough for a lot of people to get there. And it's not really a very social dose. That's one of the things that we learned about it, is that unless you do actually deliver it as a whole group at a time, if you have like a person who's low dosing that's interacting with a group that are not dosing, that it is enough for a lot of people to want to go inward. The Shrooms Cafe happens to be well set up for that, with the 3 rooms on each side and a relatively large area in the middle with chairs and stuff, where people, even during our events that are non-dosing, some people who like to have a little bit of time with their friends or a little bit of interaction as a group, get a place to kind of go, while some people who like to, cluster or dance, or maybe you're somebody who likes to do both, but at different times. And so we work towards kind of, creating a vibe that allows people to enjoy themselves without drinking alcohol, where the music is good enough. We've been, I believe, even though we're a small town, we have a breadth of musical talent that is kind of outstanding. That's what I've seen so far. We've hosted maybe 15 shows or more here. And it's been like eye-opening.
Wow. Where are you advertising your shows? Are you guys like putting up flyers, or how do you do that?
Yeah,
how do you spread the word?
We're pretty good at flyers. I would say good. I'd say we're pretty good at key spots of flyers. We do flyers, and then we have Shrooms Live Instagram that we're just bringing out to share that information. We've had a sad time with social media of closing down anything related to dosing shrooms.
Yeah.
We've cautiously approached dealing with that. So we're kind of, I guess that's a good point. We're kind of word of mouth, mostly people from downtown, because we do a pretty good job of like letting people know about our events who are walking through Ashland, but you may not know about them if you're going to the traditional channels. We have been using Eventbrite for some of them, and that's worked out pretty good in terms of getting people at least awareness up. Instagram is the shit, but it's too risky when you think you might just get pulled at the most important time to put your heart and soul into it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Mike, I would just want to offer that my podcast listening audience is kind of spread around the world. Back when I first started, I think I had a lot of local listeners, and people got excited, like, oh, this dude's in Oregon and I'm in Oregon. So I had a lot of Oregon listeners, and I really don't know what my spread is these days. But I would just want to put out there, like, if you ever want to share events with me, my podcast, new episodes come out every Monday morning at 10 a.m. And you can always share events with me, and I can mention it here on the podcast. And I don't know if that'll get you people or not, but I'm willing to do that for you. And I always love any kind of mutual support that can be given for anybody working in the psychedelic field. And I love supporting what happens in Oregon. This is my adopted state. I grew up in California, but this is where I've lived for the past 17 years. And this is where I'm going to be for the foreseeable future. This is where I've established this podcast. And I want to do what I can to help other people make a change and make a difference regarding psychedelics. And it sounds like what you guys are doing at Shrooms Cafe is pretty cool. And I love it that there's a local venue where stuff like this is going on. Like, cause like I mentioned that I used to organize all this stuff at the Well Springs, and then I organized stuff over at the Haven on the other side of town, and then that shut down. And so it's just nice that there's people out there organizing events and music and congregating around psychedelics, that for a long time I was the only person locally doing that. And like I said, I have been doing that for a number of years. So it's nice that someone is filling that gap, and that this is happening at the Shrooms Cafe, and that it can happen legally. I think that that's really important, that people have the opportunity to do these low dose experiences. They can do them in groups. It's legal. There's a space for them to do it. I've always complained about the biggest problem with the underground is that then people don't feel safe, or they don't feel that, if something goes wrong, that they can even talk about it because it's underground and we've got to keep everything secret. So I think that being able to do things above ground, above board, and have a space for people to gather and share their experiences and maybe check out some cool music or some cool events, I just think it's awesome.
It's been quite an eye-opening scenario. It sounds like is a natural continuation of what you guys were doing at the Well Springs. Like, in a way, we're just like a natural formation, especially because Ashland is such fertile ground, if you will. So many supporters. People coming out, sharing their musical talent. I find that is, like, for me at least, one of the most resonant things of doing mushrooms is that you start feeling going inwards, but also being able to be outwards in a way where you start to get stronger, in a way where you're able to actually deal with, this overriding sense of dread or social anxiety, or, and anxiety of whatever nature. And so anyway, it's been cool, getting people, because people who go on stage are already dealing with that, have them stand up and go play in front of people. I mean, it's a big task. And so anyway, it's been really fun to be able to see the artists here. We've had so many good ones. We had Craig Wright last weekend. We've had Seaquake a number of times. As I said, Yom and Iridescence, Yalima, Cromulon. Just so many gifted artists that have decided to do their part to help bring people here. They definitely are part of the experience, in my opinion, for these later night activities that don't center around alcohol. It's just a pretty nice way to live, in a way, for people, where they can still, stay out, go do things, feel comfortable hanging out with people that they really enjoy with, but they're not actually worried about driving home or anything at night. I mean, it's pretty cool to have an opportunity to see people, and how they respond to that. Yeah.
So let's just talk a little bit more about how it works for people. So, like, here on the website, it has a section that says, how does it work? And it says, like, 24-hour advance sign up. And then there's the possibility of bringing in groups. And then you guys have hours of operations for daily walk-ins and journeys and things like that. So just tell us a little bit more, like, first, let's say somebody is coming in, they're driving up from California. If you're on the I-5, Ashland is the first town you're going to hit as you cross the Northern California border after coming up through Mount Shasta. You drop down into the Rogue Valley, you land in Ashland. It's like, hey, I want to go to the Shrooms Cafe. Like, what's the process that people would go through in order to participate in something there?
Well, that's a good question. Because there's definitely a Murphy's Law, aspect to the situation with the 24-hour rule, where, because we're dosing any dose, Oregon requires that you complete that set of paperwork 24 hours in advance. And those paperworks are 5 different forms. We can do them electronically. We have an e-signature application, but somebody's required to, share that they're not, planning on driving a vehicle after doing psilocybin services, that they have a client safety and support plan where they have an opportunity to share their emergency contact, that they sign off on Oregon's relatively large list of informed consent items. They include items like making sure that you understand that it's not, you don't take them at the same time and you guys both, 2 people, for example, dose, you hit them at the same time. The rule, there is not it is a known fact that mushrooms impact people at different times. and at different volumes. And they want you to acknowledge that so that people know that. We have, in our business of being a low dosing space, we haven't had any adverse events, but Oregon is, on the eye for that. You're required to report those if they happen at your facility. So in any case, they have a client information form, and then also a 303, they call it, reporting form, where you complete those 5 pieces of paperwork. And then after those paperworks are done, then if you were coming the next day, a facilitator would call you 24 hours in advance and confirm that you didn't have any questions, go through your forms with you and make sure that your answers have been respected. That process can be short or long, depending really on the person. If it's something that you're coming up because you just broke up with your boyfriend and you're driving up here to urgently take mushrooms, you still have to wait 24 hours. So they don't really want you to be in urgent crisis mode, coming in and taking mushrooms for your first time. They want you to kind of do it thoughtfully. They have a number of questions in the client information form that kind of guide you a place if you want. How I instruct people is that don't think of them as something you can answer as short as possible to answer the right question. Think about it as, this is what I want to talk to the person who's going to be in there with me.
Yeah.
Maybe you don't have anything to talk about. Maybe you just want the mushrooms and you want to put your headphones on. But if you do, and it's something that's going to come up, or you're kind of trying to do something, or you've had a past experience that you're trying to either not get to or you want to get to, like many of the facilitators that we've seen they're quite good. They've chosen to do this as a calling. They like being there with you when you're going through this experience and providing some sort of, sense of warmth and companionship and, someone to talk to or someone to just hold space. And so you have an opportunity to kind of like nudge them and, in advance and say, hey, by the way, if I start screaming or get all cold, or I tell you, or I'm seeing colors, or I go inwards and I put my headphones on, just heads up, that's what I'm doing. So that they get to know about it. Not required by any means, but it is, I think, personally, I view it as the intention of the program to give the chance for the person to get that chance to talk. Many of the people choose that inside of the sessions. These sessions are usually 30 minutes for the low dose the first time, 15 minutes after that. You can do double the dose and stay for an hour. You can do quadruple that dose and stay for 2 hours. But when you're doing that dose, many people do like talking to the facilitators. The people we've worked with have been all, quite fun to talk to. Tons of life experience, tons of interest in this area, personal experience of it changing their lives. And no one that's worked here so far hasn't had that experience. The mushrooms have made a significant, change in their mental well-being, physical well-being. And so they're generally promoters, but, the way our model works is that we have to actually host a lot of people for it to actually work the way we do it. So we're kind of, moving people in and out. And we do that right now, 4 to 7, where people come and do a low dose session. And then we take appointments during the day where we set facilitators up with their clients to, do their sessions of longer length that are either individual or group, that are meaning that are closed, meaning that they're not open to the public to join. So we split our services that way. We've operated a number of different ways, trying to find the exact kind of right model, and explored that, over the last 6 months here.
Yeah, and with the group work, so it looks like people can actually plan to, we've got a whole group of people we want to come in and we're going to reserve the space for that time period, which again is very different than the individual large dose session where it is just you in the room with the facilitator. But this is actually allowing for people to bring in their friends, bring in their family, bring in their associates. Do a lot of people make use of that and have these sort of group events take place?
Yeah. So if I would say, I think our last reporting was something like 30 or over 35% of the doses were groups. We're required to kind of just do a quick summary to the state of anonymous, the summary of the number of people that joined and the number of groups that joined and stuff. And I don't remember it off the top of my head, but we cater to that concept. we've seen some people in very cool experiences with that. We've seen couples have full restorative, relationship processes where they asked us and we agreed to let them stay in the room after the facilitator leaves. On the low dose, the state says we only stay for 30 minutes. Well, the dose doesn't even start to like 30 minutes. It doesn't fully finish until like 2 or 3 hours. And so we've had a number of people take advantage of our kind of growing stage where they can stay longer and then keep the room to themselves and go through the whole experience there in our comfortable chairs and air-conditioned space. We serve water and tea, popcorn. We have little snacks and stuff. We've seen also people do some really creative things where they're smart people in the world. I'm not probably one of them, but who do things like get together and talk about books or talk about, the topic of du jour, and really, we've had a number of people take over whole rooms for that process with their friends or their associates or their, weekly or monthly group. And that's another scenario where we do the service, but then we leave and then they keep the room. In the open dose model, we've done countless sessions, almost it seems like, of people who come in and then there's another group or another person wanting to do it at the same time, and we mix the groups together. And on the low dose, that's perfectly fun and acceptable and great. We have some couples that come in and do their doses on a regular basis together, so we have a variety of kind of group activities. I see more of that happening. We were doing and we're going to be doing again, a dose in yoga protocol. And that protocol we found, we call it Shrooms Plus. It was like literally life-changing almost, like just crazy amount of warm energy bursting out of the person, as the person, if we bump the time, we kind of practice a bit of spreading out the services. So you do the mushrooms and then you have like a meditation and then you walk into the yoga 30 minutes later as it's really activating. And we found people, have incredibly powerful, moments in their body.
Yeah.
So anyway, it's been a playground for that. I wouldn't say we're as cool as like all the playground stuff that was going on at PsyCon in Denver, but I think our space is like a little outpost. Is how I think about it, is that there's all sorts of cool psychedelic stuff happening. There's the Global Psychedelic Society now. There's, psychedelic societies all over the world who are starting to connect people together. MAPS is, expanding its kind of warm thoughts towards this subject into further growth, I feel at least. So many people have stood up for this. I don't know if you want to call it medicine or whatever, that we feel pretty honored to have a chance to be here.
Yeah. Well, Mike, it's been great getting a chance to talk to you today and to learn about what's happening at the Shrooms Cafe, just downtown here in Ashland, Oregon, and to hear about your views and what's motivating you behind all of this and what's happening there at the cafe. I really appreciate your time speaking with me today, and I'm really happy that we've made this connection. I mean, we're here in the same town, so it's nice to actually connect and have you here on the podcast. And, I look forward to, this will be released in about a month, and I hope that at some point after that, you'll get some people coming in to the Shrooms Cafe, say, hey, I heard about this on the Entheogenic Evolution podcast and wanted to come check it out. And I hope that happens. That'd make me happy, and I'd hope that would make you happy too.
I bet you they'd be the coolest. Yeah, that has been the journey, is that in the end, people are pretty special. That's what we learned in running this business, is that people from all over the world. And so we invite that. I thank you for doing that for us. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it's great to connect, Mike, and let's stay connected. And just thank you again very much for your time today. And I look forward to actually getting my physical body over to the Shrooms Cafe and checking out your space at hopefully some point really soon.
Friday, the Lioness Portal. We got 8 women DJs and then a bunch of artists and a whole portal thing going on here. And then we're also connected with cooks downstairs. So the bar and the stairway upstairs goes up to the non-alcoholic space. It's going to be kind of a thing. If you happen to be in town, it might be worthy. I'm super excited about it. We've seen a number of these artists, and they're amazing.
Wow. Well, sounds excellent. I'll try and check it out. That's this Friday?
Yeah, 8/8 at 8.
All right, Mike. Well, thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. That was fun. I appreciate it.
All right.